After years of cramped apartment living, my wife and I had finally saved enough for our dream home. A modest three-bedroom in a quiet suburban development called Oak Ridge Estates. The neighborhood boasted tree-lined streets, immaculate lawns, and a sense of peace that felt magical after years of city noise. My pregnant wife fell in love with the place immediately, envisioning our future child playing in the fenced backyard. The day we moved in, several neighbors stopped by to introduce themselves. The Johnsons from across the street brought over a homemade apple pie. The elderly couple next door, the Patels, offered gardening advice and a cutting from their prized rose bush. Everyone seemed genuinely welcoming, and for the first time I felt like we had found not just a house, but a community. That feeling lasted exactly 3 days. On the fourth morning, as I arranged books on our living room shelves, the doorbell rang with an insistent, staccato rhythm. I opened the door to find a woman in her 50s with blonde hair pulled back so tightly, it seemed to stretch her smile into something unnatural. She wore crisp beige pants, a powder blue blouse, and carried a clipboard that she clutched like a weapon. "Hello, neighbor," she said, her voice carrying the artificial sweetness of saccharin. "I am Karen Mitchell, president of the Oak Ridge Homeowners Association. I wanted to personally welcome you to our little paradise." I invited her in politely, offering coffee, which she declined with a quick wave of her hand. Her eyes scanned our half-unpacked living room, taking inventory of every box and misplaced item. Her smile never faltered, but her eyes remained cold, calculating. "We take great pride in maintaining the aesthetic standards of Oak Ridge," Karen continued, flipping through pages on her clipboard. "I have noticed a few small issues that need your immediate attention." She proceeded to inform me that our mailbox needed repainting, though it looked perfectly fine to me. Our front hedge was apparently 2 inches taller than regulation. The welcome mat we had placed at our front door was not from the approved color palette. Each observation was delivered with the same frozen smile, but underneath ran a current of steel. "I understand you are still settling in," she said, handing me a thick binder labeled Oak Ridge Estates Homeowner Guidelines. "But these matters should be addressed within 7 days to avoid any complications." After she left, I leafed through the binder, stunned by the sheer volume of regulations. Every aspect of exterior home appearance was controlled, down to the shade of white permitted for window trim. I mentioned the visit to my next-door neighbor, who gave me a knowing look. "Karen targets the newcomers," he whispered, as though afraid of being overheard. "Those of us who have been here longer have learned to navigate her." Enthusiasm. A week later, Karen returned. This time, her smile was noticeably thinner. I had repainted the mailbox and trimmed the hedge, but apparently that was not enough. She pointed toward my driveway with a manicured fingernail. "I noticed the crack in your driveway," she said. "It detracts from the uniform appearance of our street. You will need to have that repaired." I looked at the hairline fracture that ran across one corner of the concrete. It was barely visible unless you were specifically looking for it. "It is cosmetic," I explained. "The inspector said it is normal settling and not structural." Karen's eyes narrowed slightly. "Nevertheless, it violates Section 8, Paragraph C of our guidelines. Driveways must be free of visible cracks and discoloration. I will expect to see it addressed promptly." As she walked away, I watched her make a note on her clipboard. An uneasy feeling settled in my stomach. What I had thought would be a helpful neighborhood association was starting to feel more like a dictatorship, and Karen Mitchell was clearly the dictator. That night, as my wife and I discussed nursery colors, I mentioned the driveway issue. "It seems excessive," I said. "The crack is barely noticeable." My wife placed a hand on her growing belly. "Maybe we should just fix it. I do not want any trouble, not with the baby coming." I nodded, but something about Karen's demeanor had triggered a warning in my mind. This was about more than a cracked driveway. This was about power and control. And I was beginning to suspect that peaceful compliance might not be enough to satisfy the HOA president. 3 days after Karen's second visit, an official notice appeared taped to our front door. Printed on luminescent yellow paper with bold black lettering, it announced, "Violation. Driveway repair required." The notice included a reference to the specific bylaw, a timeline for correction, 14 days, and a warning about daily fines that would accrue if the issue remained unresolved. I took photos of the driveway from multiple angles. The crack was approximately 4 feet long and no wider than a pencil lead in most places. It posed absolutely no safety hazard and was visible primarily after rainfall. Nevertheless, according to the HOA, this minor imperfection was a threat to property values throughout Oak Ridge Estates. That evening, I decided to approach Karen directly to discuss the matter reasonably. I found her in her front yard, meticulously deadheading roses while wearing gardening gloves that matched her salmon-colored cardigan. "Good evening, Karen," I greeted her politely. "I wanted to talk about the driveway notice." She straightened up, removing her gloves with deliberate slowness. "Yes, what about it?" "The crack is purely cosmetic. It does not affect function or safety. Our home inspector noted it was just normal settling." Karen's smile tightened. "The guidelines do not distinguish between cosmetic and structural issues. A crack is a crack. It sets a bad example for the neighborhood." "But the repair would be expensive, and with a baby on the way." "Rules are rules, whether you like them or not," she interrupted. "Everyone in Oak Ridge follows the same standards. That is why our property values remain high." As I walked away, feeling frustrated, I noticed Mr. Patel working in his garden. He had obviously overheard our conversation. "Do not take it personally," he said quietly when I approached. "She has been like this since taking over the HOA 3 years ago." "Does she target everyone like this?" I asked. Mr. Patel glanced toward Karen's house before responding. "She forced the Gonzalez family to repaint their entire house because the shade of tan was too yellow. The Wilsons had to remove a beautiful maple tree that was allegedly too close to the sidewalk, and Mrs. Cooper, a widow on fixed income, had to replace her entire fence. That cost her nearly $8,000. I was shocked. Why does nobody stand up to her? "She knows the bylaws better than a lawyer knows the law," Mr. Patel sighed. "And she has friends on the Architectural Review Committee. Most people find it easier to comply than fight." That night, I started a digital folder on my computer. I took more photos of the driveway crack, saved the violation notice, and began documenting all interactions with Karen and the HOA. Something told me I might need this evidence later. The next day, another notice appeared, this one marked urgent. It claimed the driveway crack represented a community safety hazard and that my failure to address it was endangering residents. The hyperbole was absurd. No one could possibly trip on this barely perceptible fissure, but the escalation in language concerned me. I called the HOA office and requested to speak with other board members. The secretary informed me that all violation appeals must go through the president first. It was a perfect system for Karen to maintain control. While walking my dog that evening, I met several neighbors who expressed sympathy for my situation. One of them, Dave, from 4 houses down, lowered his voice as he told me, "She has the board wrapped around her finger. They rubber stamp everything she wants." "Has anyone ever challenged her?" I asked. Dave looked uncomfortable. "The last guy who really stood up to her found his car keyed 3 times in 1 month. No cameras caught who did it, of course." I returned home and added notes from these conversations to my growing file. I also began researching state laws regarding HOA powers and limitations. If Karen wanted to play hardball over a hairline crack, I needed to understand the playing field. The next day, a certified letter arrived from the HOA's attorney, claiming I was in willful violation of community standards and threatening legal action if the driveway was not repaired within 10 days. The letter also mentioned that my continued defiance reflected poorly on my character as a new community member. This was no longer about a crack in concrete. This was about a crack in authority. Karen was making an example of me, demonstrating what happened to those who questioned her judgment. But she had chosen the wrong homeowner to intimidate. I looked at my pregnant wife, who now appeared worried by the escalating situation. "Do not worry," I assured her. "I am going to handle this properly." What Karen did not know was that before becoming a homeowner, I had spent 5 years working for a construction company. I understood concrete, regulations, and safety issues better than most, and I was about to put that knowledge to good use. The first thing I did was call 3 different contractors for professional assessments and quotes. The reputable ones all said the same thing. The crack was cosmetic, not structural, and represented no safety hazard whatsoever. Their repair estimates ranged from $1,800 to $2,400, not a small amount for us with medical bills for the baby on the horizon. The third contractor, Michael from Precision Concrete, spent extra time examining the driveway. He pointed to faded orange spray paint marks near the street end of the driveway. "See these utility markings? There is a gas line running beneath this section," he explained. "It is not uncommon in developments of this age. The crack likely formed because of slight settling above the line." Michael took additional photos and measurements. "I can repair this, but I need to flag something important. Grinding or cutting this concrete for replacement puts us dangerously close to that gas line. We would need proper utility marking and possibly special permits." This new information changed everything. I asked Michael to provide a formal written assessment, which he emailed the next day. His report clearly stated that standard driveway repair procedures could potentially compromise the gas line, creating a genuine safety hazard. Armed with this professional documentation, I contacted the HOA office and requested an emergency meeting with Karen and the board. The secretary sounded sympathetic, but said Karen handled all initial violation appeals personally. She scheduled a meeting with just Karen for the following afternoon. Karen arrived at my house precisely at the appointed time. She wore a burgundy pantsuit and carried her ever-present clipboard. I invited her to sit at our dining room table, where I had arranged Michael's report, photos, and utility marking diagrams. "I have investigated the driveway repair as requested," I began, maintaining a professional tone. "However, a licensed contractor has identified a serious safety concern. There is a gas line running beneath the crack." I showed her the utility markings and the contractor's warning. Karen barely glanced at the documents. "This changes nothing," she said dismissively. "The gas line is your responsibility, not the HOA's. You purchased the property with this issue." "But the contractor advises that standard repair methods could rupture the line," I explained. "That would create an actual safety hazard for the entire street." Karen's eyes narrowed. "I find it convenient that you suddenly discovered this issue after receiving violation notices. The driveway must be repaired according to guidelines. How you manage the gas line is your problem. Could we request a variance under these circumstances? Or perhaps the architectural committee could." "No exceptions," she interrupted. "You have 7 more days before daily fines begin. I suggest you find a contractor willing to work around your obstacle." After she left, I immediately emailed all board members, attaching the contractor's report and a formal request for a safety review. Only one member, Janet Thompson, responded, saying she would bring it up at the next board meeting scheduled for the following week. I decided to get a second opinion. I called 2 more concrete specialists who had experience with utility issues. Both confirmed Michael's assessment. One refused to take the job at all, stating the risk was too high without proper utility company involvement. The other said he could do it, but it would require specialized equipment, utility company supervision, and permits, tripling the cost to nearly $7,000. I documented these additional assessments and followed up with a formal letter to the HOA board, copying their attorney. The letter carefully outlined the safety concerns, included all professional opinions, and requested a reasonable accommodation given the unusual circumstances. The day before the scheduled board meeting, I received a terse email from Karen. "Due to scheduling conflicts, tomorrow's board meeting is canceled. Your appeal will be addressed at next month's meeting." This deliberate delay tactic was the final straw. Karen was not just being unreasonable, she was potentially forcing me into a dangerous situation. I called the city's building inspector's office and explained my predicament. They agreed to send someone out the following day. The city inspector, a no-nonsense woman named Gloria, confirmed everything the contractors had said. "This is absolutely a safety concern," she stated, making official notes on her tablet. "Concrete cutting or removal in this area without proper gas line protection could be catastrophic." She provided me with an official inspection report that clearly indicated the repair, as demanded by the HOA, would violate city safety protocols without proper utility involvement. I added this document to my growing file, feeling both vindicated and increasingly concerned about Karen's reckless insistence. That evening, I noticed Karen watching from her window as Gloria's city vehicle pulled away from my house. The HOA president's expression was impossible to read at a distance, but her rigid posture suggested she was not pleased by this development. What I did not know then was just how far Karen was willing to go to maintain her authority, and how dangerous her next move would be. The morning after the city inspector's visit, I discovered a large, laminated violation notice staked prominently in my front yard. Unlike the previous notices delivered to my door, this one was designed for public display and humiliation. In bright red letters, it announced, "Property in violation. Failure to maintain community SDA&DARDS." I immediately removed it, but not before several neighbors had seen it. Later that afternoon, I found another identical sign, this one zip-tied to my mailbox. Removal required cutting tools. This was a new level of aggressive enforcement. The following day, a stack of envelopes arrived from the HOA. Each contained a separate violation notice, with escalating fines now totaling over $500. $1 notice cited the removal of official HOA notification signs as an additional violation. Another claimed my garbage bins had been visible from the street for too long after collection, something I knew was untrue as I had been meticulously careful about all HOA rules since moving in. Karen was manufacturing violations, piling them on to increase pressure. This was no longer about community standards, it was personal. The public shamming strategy was having its intended effect. Several neighbors who had previously been friendly now avoided eye contact when I waved. One mother pulled her child closer when they walked past our house, as though proximity to a rule breaker might be contagious. Only the Patels and a few others maintained their friendliness, though even they seemed uncomfortable discussing the situation openly. "Karen has eyes everywhere," Mrs. Patel warned when I stopped to chat. "Be careful." I contacted the city utility office directly, requesting formal documentation about the gas line beneath my driveway. They confirmed its presence and sent an official letter stating that any excavation or concrete cutting in that area required advance notification and supervision by their technicians. The letter explicitly noted that unsupervised work could result in gas line rupture, creating explosion risk to surrounding properties. Armed with this additional official documentation, I attempted to attend the next HOA board meeting to present my case. I arrived at the community center conference room at the scheduled time, only to find a handwritten note on the door. "Meeting canceled due to emergency. Will reschedule." I later learned from Janet Thompson that there had been no emergency. Karen had canceled the meeting unilaterally when she discovered I planned to attend with documentation from the city. My wife was now 8 months pregnant and increasingly stressed by the situation. "Maybe we should just pay whatever it costs to fix it safely," she suggested one evening. "I do not want our baby born into a neighborhood war zone." I understood her concern, but something deeper was at stake. "If we give in now, Karen will never stop," I explained. "This is about more than a driveway. This is about a person abusing power at the expense of safety and reason." The next day, I filed a formal complaint with the local building inspector's office, requesting an official safety intervention. I included copies of all HOA notices, contractor reports, and utility documentation. The office assured me they would investigate and potentially issue a stop order against any unsafe repairs. That evening, I recorded a video documenting the crack, the utility markings, and the various professional assessments, narrating the entire situation clearly. I uploaded this to a private cloud account, creating a time-stamped record of the condition and safety concerns. 3 days later, I received an email from the HOA attorney threatening legal action for continued noncompliance and deliberate defiance of community standards. The email mentioned potential property liens if fines remained unpaid. I forwarded this email to my own attorney, a college friend who specialized in real estate law. His response was encouraging. "They are overreaching. The safety documentation you have assembled creates a strong defense. Keep documenting everything." Another week passed with daily violation notices appearing in my mailbox. The fines now exceeded $1,200. My attorney advised me not to pay them while we prepared a formal legal response. Karen escalated further by scheduling an emergency HOA meeting at 1:00 p.m. on a Tuesday, a time when most homeowners would be at work and unable to attend. I took time off specifically to be there, but upon arrival was informed by the secretary that non-board members are not permitted at special sessions. Through the meeting room window, I could see Karen gesturing animatedly to the board members, occasionally pointing to photos of what appeared to be my driveway. I took photos of this meeting from outside, adding them to my documentation. The following day, I received a certified letter informing me that the HOA board had voted to take direct remedial action regarding my driveway, invoking a bylaw that allowed them to hire contractors to correct violations and bill the homeowner for all costs plus administrative fees. This was beyond unreasonable. It was dangerous. I immediately contacted my attorney, the building inspector's office, and the city utility department, alerting them to the HOA's intentions to potentially interfere with a gas line. The building inspector promised to issue a formal stop work order until proper permits and utility supervision were arranged. The utility company said they would flag my address in their system and require notification before any excavation work. I believed these safeguards would prevent any immediate action. I was wrong. The call came at 10:17 a.m. on a Wednesday. I was in a meeting at work when my phone buzzed repeatedly. It was Mrs. Patel, her voice trembling with urgency. "They are digging up your driveway right now," she said. "A crew arrived with equipment. I tried to tell them about the gas line, but they said they have HOA authorization." My heart pounded as I raced out of the office, telling my boss it was an emergency. The 20-minute drive home felt endless. I called the city utility office from my car, alerting them to the unauthorized excavation. They promised to dispatch an emergency team immediately. I also called my attorney, who advised me to document everything but not to physically interfere with the workers for liability reasons. "Take video from a safe distance," he instructed. As I turned onto my street, I could see the contractor's truck parked in my driveway. 2 workers were operating a concrete saw, cutting directly along the crack. A third man was setting up barriers at the edge of the property. There was no sign of any utility company supervision. I parked across the street and began recording video on my phone as I approached. "You need to stop immediately," I called out. "There is a gas line under there. This work has not been properly permitted." The foreman, a heavy-set man in a yellow hard hat, barely glanced up. "We have authorization from the Homeowners Association to perform this repair. Please stand back, sir." "I am the homeowner," I said, "and I did not authorize this work. There is a documented safety hazard here." The man pulled out a folder and showed me a work order signed by Karen as HOA president. "My company was hired legally by your HOA. If you have an issue, take it up with them." I stepped closer, still recording. "There is a gas line directly beneath where you are cutting. The city utility office has documented this. You need proper permits and supervision." For the first time, the foreman looked uncertain. He glanced at his crew, then back at the partially cut concrete. "Look, I am just doing the job I was hired for." At that moment, I noticed Karen's car pulling up across the street. She emerged with her clipboard, a triumphant expression on her face as she watched the work proceed. I approached her phone, still recording. "You know this is dangerous. You saw the utility reports. Why would you do this?" Her smile was cold. The board voted. The work is proceeding according to HOA bylaws. Perhaps next time you will comply with notices promptly instead of looking for excuses. Just as the words left her mouth, a horrible sound came from the driveway, a hissing followed by workers shouting. The concrete saw had nicked the gas line. "Everybody back," the foreman yelled, dropping his equipment and running. "Gas leak." The workers scattered as the hissing grew louder. The acrid smell of mercaptan, the chemical added to natural gas to make it detectable, filled the air. Neighbors began emerging from their homes, alerted by the commotion. I dialed 911 as I backed away, still recording. "Gas line rupture at 437 Oak Ridge Drive. Evacuation needed immediately." Karen stood frozen, her clipboard hanging limply at her side. The reality of what she had set in motion was finally registering on her face. The next few moments passed in surreal slow motion. The gas ignited. Later investigation would show a spark from the abandoned concrete saw was the likely cause. A whoosh of flame shot upward, followed by a concussive boom that shattered my front windows and sent debris flying across the yard. Fire trucks arrived within minutes, followed by police cruisers and utility emergency vehicles. The entire street was cordoned off as firefighters battled the blaze that had engulfed a portion of my driveway and front lawn. Miraculously, the house itself sustained only minor damage, primarily to its front facade and windows. As residents gathered behind the safety perimeter, I noticed Karen speaking animatedly to a police officer, gesturing toward me repeatedly. I could not hear her words, but her body language suggested she was attempting to shift blame. A news van arrived, a reporter and cameraman quickly setting up near the police barricade. I was still in shock, watching my property smoldering behind emergency vehicles when the reporter approached me. "Sir, we understand you are the homeowner. Can you tell us what happened here today?" Before I could answer, I felt a hand on my shoulder. It was my attorney, who had driven directly to the scene after my call. "My client will provide a full statement later," he said calmly. "For now, he needs to cooperate with emergency services." The reporter persisted. "We have been told this was the result of an unauthorized repair attempt by the homeowner. Is that accurate?" My attorney's grip tightened on my shoulder, but I had spent too many weeks being silenced. "That is absolutely false," I stated clearly. "This work was ordered by the HOA president against my explicit warnings about the gas line. I have documentation from city inspectors, utility companies, and multiple contractors verifying the danger. I objected to this work repeatedly, but the HOA proceeded anyway." I held up my phone. "I have video of today's events, including workers stating they were hired by the HOA, and the HOA president on site as the work proceeded despite safety warnings." The reporter's eyes widened at this revelation, and her cameraman swung to focus on Karen, who was now attempting to leave the scene. A police officer stepped into her path, apparently asking her to remain. The fire chief approached me next, notepad in hand. "We will need a complete statement about what transpired here. The gas company representative wants to speak with you as well." As the immediate danger was contained, the full documentation process began. I provided copies of all my records to the police, fire investigators, and utility company representatives. The concrete company foreman, perhaps realizing his own liability, admitted they had been pressured to proceed quickly and had not pulled proper permits for the work. By evening, the story had spread to multiple news outlets. An investigative reporter was already digging into the HOA's history of aggressive enforcement actions. Several neighbors, seeing the tide turning, began sharing their own experiences with Karen's tactics. As my wife and I checked into a hotel for the night, our home temporarily uninhabitable due to smoke damage and broken windows, I received a text from Janet Thompson. "Emergency board meeting tomorrow. This has gone too far." The HOA's power play had literally blown up in their faces, and Karen's reign of terror was about to face a very public reckoning. The explosion became the lead story on local news channels. "HOA dispute leads to gas explosion. read the headlines. The coverage painted a clear picture. An overzealous homeowners association had ignored safety warnings and caused a dangerous incident that could have resulted in deaths. The city government launched an immediate investigation. The mayor, facing public outrage, directed the housing department to review all HOA practices within city limits. Inspectors arrived at the Oak Ridge Estates HOA office the morning after the explosion with a subpoena for all records related to violation enforcement. Karen attempted to limit access, claiming certain documents were private. The city attorney overruled her objections, and investigators removed boxes of files and multiple computers. What they found was disturbing: a pattern of selective enforcement, targeting of new homeowners, and disproportionate penalties that appeared to violate state HOA regulations. My attorney filed a civil lawsuit 3 days after the incident, nomming both the HOA and Karen personally. The suit claimed negligence, harassment, and willful disregard for safety. We requested damages for property repair, temporary housing costs, emotional distress, and punitive damages to discourage similar behavior in the future. The most surprising development came from within the neighborhood itself. Janet Thompson contacted me privately, saying several board members were disturbed by what had happened and by what they were learning about Karen's actions. Many of the violation notices and enforcement actions were never properly approved by the board, Janet explained. Karen acted unilaterally in many cases, including yours. She only brought matters to the board after she had already escalated them. Janet and 2 other board members supplied affidavits supporting these claims. They described how Karen had manipulated meeting minutes, scheduled key votes when certain members could not attend, and in some cases, forged approvals for actions never discussed. The tipping point came when other homeowners began coming forward. The Gonzalez family described how their child's college fund had been depleted to pay for an unnecessary house repainting. Mrs. Cooper, the elderly widow, shared how she had been forced to take out a loan to replace a fence that had been perfectly functional. In total, 17 families provided statements about Karen's targeted harassment. An emergency HOA board meeting was called, with homeowners demanding to attend. Unlike previous meetings, this one was packed, with residents standing along the walls of the community center. Karen arrived looking confident, but her expression faltered when she saw the crowd. Janet called the meeting to order and immediately presented a motion to remove Karen as president, citing abuse of power and actions endangering the community. The vote was not even close. Karen was removed from the board with only one dissenting vote, her own. As she gathered her things to leave, Karen attempted one final power play. "This is all a misunderstanding," she announced. "I have filed counter-complaints against several homeowners, including our driveway friend, for violations of community standards and false statements. Those proceedings will continue." Janet calmly responded, "All pending violation notices have been suspended pending review by the new board. All outstanding fines are also suspended." The room erupted in applause as Karen stormed out. Her reign of terror effectively ended. The legal proceedings continued for several months. My lawsuit against the HOA was eventually settled out of court for a substantial sum that covered all property damages, temporary housing costs, and additional compensation for distress. More importantly, the settlement included provisions requiring the HOA to adopt new, more transparent enforcement procedures and to establish an appeals process overseen by a neutral third party. Karen faced personal legal consequences as well. The investigation revealed she had selectively enforced rules against homeowners who challenged her authority while ignoring similar violations by her allies. In one particularly damning case, records showed she had waived significant fines for a board member who supported her initiatives, while simultaneously pursuing aggressive enforcement against others for identical issues. The district attorney ultimately declined to file criminal charges, but Karen was named personally in multiple civil suits. Her insurance refused to cover her legal costs, citing willful misconduct exclusions. The financial burden forced her to put her house on the market. The most satisfying moment came during her deposition in my lawsuit. My attorney presented the complete timeline of events, including every warning about the gas line that Karen had ignored or dismissed. Given the documented safety concerns, my attorney asked, why did you proceed with this dangerous repair without proper utility company supervision? Karen shifted uncomfortably. I was enforcing the bylaws as written. The board approved the action. We have testimony from 3 board members stating they never approved this specific repair method, my attorney countered. And we have emails showing you received the utility company warnings. Did you share those warnings with the board? Her hesitation was damning. I summarized the situation as I understood it. Did you inform the board that cutting into the concrete could rupture a gas line? Yes or no? After a long pause, she answered, no. That single word effectively ended her defense. Her actions had not been merely overzealous enforcement. They had been knowingly dangerous and deliberately deceptive. 2 weeks later, a moving truck appeared outside Karen's house. She left without saying goodbye to anyone, her reputation in tatters and her power completely stripped away. The neighborhood collective sigh of relief was almost audible. Karen's house sold quickly, purchased by a young family excited to join what real estate listings now described as a friendly, community-oriented neighborhood with reasonable HOA oversight. The irony was not lost on those of us who had lived through the previous regime. The reconstituted HOA board, now led by Janet Thompson, invited me to help review and revise the community guidelines. We formed a committee of homeowners representing different demographics within Oak Ridge: families with children, retirees, single homeowners, and new residents. Together, we rewrote the bylaws to focus on community well-being rather than rigid compliance. The new guidelines emphasized safety, practicality, and the spirit rather than the letter of regulations. Cosmetic issues were clearly distinguished from structural concerns. Fines were reduced and made proportional to the severity of issues. Most importantly, a fair appeals process was established, with rotating community members serving alongside board representatives. My driveway was eventually repaired under the watchful supervision of city utility workers. The gas line was properly marked and protected during the work. The entire process was used as a case study in the revised HOA manual on how to properly address safety concerns. Neighbors who had once avoided eye contact now stopped to chat. Several admitted they had been intimidated by Karen but had been too afraid to speak up. It was like living under a microscope, one explained. You never knew when she would target you next. The Patels invited us to a garden party celebrating their 40th wedding anniversary. While there, Mr. Patel raised a toast to neighbors who stand up for what is right, even when it is difficult. On a perfect spring morning, 6 months after the explosion, our daughter Emma was born, healthy, beautiful, and blissfully unaware of the battle that had preceded her arrival. I stood on our newly repaired driveway, holding her tiny form wrapped in a pink blanket, and felt a profound sense of peace. The scars from the explosion had been repaired. The windows had been replaced. The lawn had been resodded. But the most significant change was invisible. The atmosphere of fear and control had been replaced by genuine community spirit. Janet approached me one day as I was collecting the mail. You know, if you had not stood your ground, we might still be living under Karen's thumb, she said. Sometimes it takes one person willing to say no to change things for everyone. I thought about how close I had come to simply giving in, to paying for the repairs despite the danger, just to keep the peace. How tempting it had been to surrender to unreasonable demands rather than face conflict. How much easier compliance would have seemed in the short term. But some battles need to be fought, not just for ourselves, but for the greater good. Sometimes standing firm against a bully protects not just your own interests, but those of an entire community. Our house is truly a home now. Emma takes her first steps on a lawn no longer marred by violation notices. My wife and I chat with neighbors without fear of being reported for some minor infraction. The HOA still exists, but as a support system rather than a policing force. As for Karen, we heard through the neighborhood grapevine that she had moved to a condominium development in another county. Rumors suggested she had already volunteered for their community association. I almost felt sorry for her new neighbors. Almost. The most profound lesson from our ordeal came unexpectedly one evening as I rocked Emma to sleep. Looking at her peaceful face, I realized what had truly been at stake. It was not just about a cracked driveway or standing up to a bully. It was about the kind of world we create through our actions or inactions. By challenging unreasonable authority, we had not only protected our family, but had helped transform a toxic environment into a nurturing community. The Gonzalez children now played freely in their yard without fear of arbitrary rules. Mrs. Cooper hosted weekly card games without worrying about visitors' cars being reported. New residents were welcomed with genuine warmth rather than clipboard inspections. The following spring, we organized the first annual Oak Ridge Block Party, something Karen had never allowed, citing noise concerns and liability issues. Children raced bicycles on safely closed streets. Neighbors shared potluck dishes representing their diverse cultural backgrounds. Music played well into the evening as old and young residents alike celebrated not just their community but their freedom within it. As dusk fell, Janet raised her glass in another toast. "To neighbors becoming friends," she said, "and to remembering that rules exist to serve people, not the other way around." I looked around at the faces illuminated by string lights and tiki torches, faces that had once been strained with anxiety, now relaxed in genuine enjoyment. My wife squeezed my hand, Emma sleeping peacefully in her carrier between us. "Worth it," she whispered. I nodded every moment. The gas line incident, as we now called it, had become part of neighborhood lore, a cautionary tale about power unchecked and the importance of standing firm for what is right. But more than that, it had become a foundation story for the community we were now building together. I often think about how differently things might have turned out. If I had simply complied with Karen's demands, ignoring the safety risks, would someone else have been injured later when the inevitable happened? If I had retreated into silent resentment like so many others, would the neighborhood still be living under her regime of fear? We cannot always choose our battles, but we can choose whether to fight them. Standing up against injustice, even in the seemingly small arenas of our daily lives, matters more than we realize. The repercussions extend beyond our personal situations to affect everyone around us. As I watch Emma grow day by day, I am grateful she will learn this lesson early. That courage does not mean fearlessness, but rather facing fear with integrity. That community requires both cooperation and occasional principled resistance. That some cracks, whether in concrete or in human systems, reveal important truths that should not be simply paved over. Our driveway now bears no trace of the original crack or the explosion that followed. But the memory of what happened there has left an indelible mark on all of us. A reminder that standing up for what is right, even against seemingly insurmountable opposition, can change not just our own lives, but the lives of everyone around us. And that is a lesson worth all the struggle it took to learn it.